Hello, everybody. This is Debo of Debo's Film Reviews, and this week's review will be Days of Thunder. Should I say Daytona of Thunder, starring Tom Cruise as Cole Trickle, Robert Duvall as Harry Hogg, Nicole Kidman as Dr. Claire Lewicki, Randy Quaid as Tim DeLand, and Cary Elwes as Russ Wheeler, featuring Don Simpson as Aldo Benedetti, which is just a cameo role, alongside actual NASCAR drivers at the time: Rusty Wallace, Neil Bonnet, and Harry Gant. Which this was the second NASCAR related movies that both Gant and Bonnet cameoed in. Which this one was real tied to Bonnet's because when filming it he was running for Road Brothers until his real life accident in Darlington that had him retired for 2 years, and then he went back to racing until his death in Daytona in 1994, and then of course with Gant having a second cameo appearance because he was, like I mentioned in the Stroker Race review, where he drove to Burt Reynolds' Skull Bandit. And of course, a lot of fun facts about how Cole Trickle, named after Dick Trickle, though loosely based on Tim Richmond. Excuse me. Who in the 1980s was an up-and-comer open-wheel IndyCar driver who later transitioned to NASCAR and had bigger success in theirs until his career was prematurely cut short from AIDS. And of course, Harry Hogg was based on actual crew chief Harry Hyde, who at the time was Richmond's crew, who in the 80s was Richmond's crew chief and crew chief to a lot of others, but most famously were Richmond and Benny Parsons, which of course the whole scene of the Camp Pit Now We're Having Ice Cream was actually based on a real racing event. And that scene where Cole Trickle knocks out Russ Wheeler, his teammate, was actually based on an incident in the 87 All-Star race between Earnhardt and Bill Elliott. Though there was no passing the grass in the movie. And of course, with Randy Quaid's character Tim DeLand was also based on Rick Hendrick, and of course, City Chevrolet was actually for those that not will follow NASCAR, was actually a real company, which is now Rick Hendrick Chevrolet, and of course with Hendrick Motorsports providing the cars for the film, which throughout the film where stunt doubles were for Tom Cruise and Michael Rooker. Yeah, I should also mention Michael Rooker as Rowdy Burns. And like I say, when it comes to the badassery of Rowdy Burns, you can pretty much say he predicted Kyle Busch. Congratulations on that win in the Busch class, Kyle. Which of course when Kyle Busch started his Truck Series team, he based his number off that movie, like the 51, preferably the 51, which is his Truck Series number, and how he wound up in the 18, which is now Kyle Busch's car, but in the movie was Russ Wheeler in the 18 Hardy's car. Well, in the final race at the end of the movie where Cole Trickle was driving the Melo Yo car, you get him out to say that kind of predicted Kyle Petty's car for the 92-93 seasons. But with the Mellow Yellow ride, except it was a Chevy Lumina instead of a Pontiac Grand Prix. And back to Roddy Burns, and you gotta say he was a dirty racer from the beginning of the movie when it shows at the beginning where he's knocked out when he's knocks out the Richard Petty car. And surprisingly, the biggest goof in this film, or should I say goose, was that scene when Tom, Dr. Lewicki, Cole Trickle, Dr. Lewicki, and Rowdy are at their house, and this woman just talking. Someone says, "Hey, Tom," and then of course with the whole ESPN deal with Bob Jenkins, at the time was Bob Jenkins and Benny Parsons and Ned Jarrett doing commentary for Daytona 500, which in reality ESPN did not carry Daytona 500. CBS did between '79 and 2000. And of course, got an excellent use of the song "Give Me Some Lovin'" with that old Cole Trickle crash montage, and ooh, talk about the excellent performance of Nicole Kidman as Dr. Lewicki. It was handpicked by Tom Cruise, which kind of explains their relationship throughout the '90s. And of course, with you got back to Rowdy. A little fun fact: his stunt double was actually Bobby Hamilton Sr., who of course raced between the '90s till his death in 2000 of cancer. And talk about some excellent racing scenes in this film. I mean, likely one of the most quintessential films for anybody who likes Tom Cruise or NASCAR in general. I mean, and I love my NASCAR. I mean, I look at it. Days of Thunder should have had sequels. I mean, when Don Simpson was still alive, they could have did like one where it centered around a rivalry between Al Benedetti and Cole Trickle, which they were supposed to do some scenes, which was a bigger part, but a lot of them were scrapped in production for reasons, and of course speaking of sequel, I'm just surprised that they decided to make a Top Gun 2 sequel instead of a Days of Thunder 2, because personally, I'd rather see a Days of Thunder sequel. I mean, there's a lot more plot with that. Like, for example, it could be like a retiring Cole Trickle training a young hotshot rookie to be his replacement. And a lot of aspects, like how I said, where this Cole Trickle was actually based on both Dick Trickle and Tim Richmond. I meant with preparation for this race, Tom Cruise actually raced sports car racing, and I actually heard on old radio once about this film, and it was a joke about sports car racing, which back then was SCCA, not IMSA, and they called it "See Cruise Crash Again," given how insurance reasons forbid Tom Cruise for doing his own stunts, which of course we all know Tom Cruise loves to claim he does his own stunts, but of course Greg Sacks took the role and actually ran the 46 City Chevrolet in the Daytona 1990 Daytona duels for filming purposes, which of course the Roddy Burns car and the piloted by Hamilton in that race, and the 46 were not credited, and were parked at halfway through and although they could have had like had an epic scene that they scrapped with, according to Internet Movie Database, where they had like a scene where they showed them getting lapped by Earnhardt, and I'm surprised Senior didn't get a cameo, and let alone Daryl Jaws Waltrip. I mean, especially since at the time Waltrip was a Hendrick driver, and of course with Rick Hendrick was being a highly influential in the film aspect of the film, and of course, like I just mentioned, Randy Quaid's character was based off of him, and of course the Fred Thompson character Big John was actually based off Big Bill France. Although all in the movie, it was a Big John was a track president and told them told those two to behave on the track after their recent account after that their a near fatal wreck of Trickle and Burns, which of course shows at the end of the Daytona 500 where he's in the mail or Cole Trickle's in Rowdy's car after Rowdy done had his bell rung too many times and decided and was forced to retire. You know, we'll talk about the character development between how Ryder, between Rowdy Burns and Cole Trickle, how they went from rivals to friends. And I should also mention some side performances of John C. Reilly as Buck Breverton, who throughout the movie you get mentioned by his dad, Buddy Breverton, who was based off. It was a fictional driver who was killed at Daytona in the movie, and Hogg was the crew chief before retiring until it was offered by Tim DeLand, or should I say Rick Hendrick, to build a race car. And of course, the old encounter and the fact that they decided to make Cole Trickle a open wheel guy who decides to go racing, and I mean you could almost say he kind of predicted old Wonder Boy Jeff Gordon for influence. Say this film kind of influenced the rise of Californian stock car racing throughout the '90s. I mean, you already had Ernie Swervin Irvin and getting his start back at the time, and then '92 with Gordon and Petty having in the '92 Atlanta Hooters 500, and then the household name Jeff Gordon became. And man, Tony Scott did a damn good directing of this film. I mean, it sucks you're gone, man. And excellent performances all around. I mean, perfect cast, and the fact that this film did not get sequels is a major crime. I mean, I could have had some excellent material. And back to what I mentioned about John C. Reilly playing Buck Breverton, I'm saying if Days of Thunder was actually more of a comedy, you could say in fanfare it could have been a prequel to Ricky Bobby, where in Ricky Bobby he and Ricky started out as a crew chief, pit crew, who eventually became drivers. But of course, Days of Thunder is more dramatic and all, and an excellent portrayal of a film of racing. Though somewhat inaccurate, like I just mentioned with the ESPN broadcasting commentary on Daytona 500, and I'm just like, which that was total BS. Because CBS did not carry Daytona. I mean, ESPN did not carry Daytona. Right there, original run between '79 to 2000, and of course, like I mentioned, the Pit Now Can't Have Ice Cream story with Benny Parsons. It's kind of fitting given that he had a vocal cameo in the film, and of course, with such perfect casting of Robert Duvall as Harry Hogg and Tom Cruise as Cole Trickle. And I mean, if they did make a sequel, then they could have. I mean, Cary Elwes wouldn't have been typecast as Dread Pirate Roberts throughout his inter-team rivalry between Trickle and Russ Wheeler. Overall, Days of Thunder gets a 5 out of 5. Enjoy, people.